Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapad Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajiva Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Prabhupada Nugami Shri Subhag Swami Sata Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshitari Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinatarina Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Isharam Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So today we'll continue discussing Krishna's wonderful pastimes. So it's just the day before Janmashtami in Auckland. We'd like to thank Nandavraj Prabhu for allowing us all to continuously meditate on the pastimes of Krishna for the last week. As we discussed before, last week, so Krishna has many reasons for appearing, and one of them is Anugrahaya Bhaktana Manusham Dehamastita Bhajate Tadrishi Krida Yat Shutva Tat Paro Bhave. So Anugrahaya Bhaktanam, he's so merciful to the devotees that he takes the human form and performs pastimes so that all those who hear his pastimes, they will become attracted and dedicated to him. So at the moment the whole world is attracted to Krishna's external energy, Maya. And he's performing all these leelas so that we will all be attracted towards Krishna. And over the last week, we've been hearing Krishna Katha. So if we've been hearing with rapt attention, Sushushu Shraddadanasya Vasudeva Katharuchi, if we've been hearing Krishna's pastimes with rapt attention, then slowly our hearts should have become purified. And we would have all the desire for material enjoyment should slowly be going. And we'll be developing more attachment towards Krishna's name, form, pastimes. This service to Krishna, Krishna Seva, Krishna Bhakta Seva. We should be eager to serve Krishna's devotees. So we can check ourselves. This is not a sentimental process. It's a very scientific process. We do this and we should see some results. So today we'll discuss a famous pastime. So here Parikshit Maharaj is asking, he's telling Sukadev Goswami that people in this world, the conditioned souls, they are frustrated because you're searching out material pleasure from sense gratification. And they're always frustrated in these attempts. But he's experienced, Sukadev, Parikshit Maharaj is saying, I'm experiencing so much bliss, all my sufferings are being, relieved just by hearing these transcendental topics of Krishna. There's no one who's intelligent can reject this method of hearing the Lord's transcendental pastimes. And hearing this, Sukadeva Goswami becomes overwhelmed with ecstasy, and he wants to speak more Krishna Katha. So he's saying, okay, let me tell you some more now. So now I'm going to talk about a special personality. And then he describes this personality. He says, Krishnasya sit saka kaschid brahmano brahma vittamaha virakta indriyarteshu prasannatma jitendriya. So he's describing this person he's going to speak about. So he's Krishnasya sit saka cheti. He is a friend of Krishna. And what kind of friend? He's a brahmano. He's a Brahmin. And he's not just an ordinary Brahmin, he's Brahma Vittamaha. He is the best amongst Brahmins. He's the most knowledgeable. He's elevated in transcendental knowledge. And Vimukta Indriyarteshu, he's completely detached from sense gratification. And because he's completely detached from sense gratification, he's Prasannatma. He is completely peaceful because he's not running after sense gratification. So he's very peaceful. And he's Jitendriya, his senses are all controlled. And Srila Prabhupada explains that he's a pure devotee of the Lord. Because he says, Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavan mam prapadyante vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabam. Jnanavan, one who's really intelligent, he would have surrendered to Krishna. And he says here, Brahma Vittamaha, he's got full transcendental knowledge. That means he must be a pure devotee of the Lord. So this friend of Krishna that Sukadeva Goswami has described is Sudama Vipra, the Brahmana Sudama Vipra. And he was completely uninterested in accumulating wealth. He was satisfied with whatever he got, whatever little bit he got, he was happy. And he used all his time not looking for sense gratification, how to earn more money, how to increase my, material possessions, but he used his time to advance in Krishna consciousness. He had hardly any food. They'll be eating hardly any grains. He had some old clothes that he had for so many years. Hardly any pots in the house. And he was just skin and bones. But he was constantly absorbed in thinking of Krishna. And his wife was also an ideal wife. She wasn't pestering him, why don't you go out and work? Why don't you bring more money? She was always thinking, how can I serve my husband? And her absorption was in serving a husband because she knew that a husband is a pure devotee, he's a servant of Krishna. So she wanted to serve him to the best of her abilities. And that is the best form of worship. Parvati asked Lord Shiva, says, my Lord, what is the best form of worship? And Lord Shiva told her, Aradhanam sarvesham Vishnu aradhanam param. Says of all types of worship, worship of Lord Vishnu is the highest. And Parvati is thinking, oh, but I'm not worshipping Vishnu, I'm worshipping Lord Shiva. What will be my condition? Because you're saying worship of Vishnu is the highest. So what's going to happen to me? And Lord Shiva says, don't worry, Devi, don't worry. So tasmat parataram Devi tadiyanam samacharam. So don't worry, because above the worship of Vishnu is the worship of my devotee. And Lord Shiva is best amongst devotees. So that's the best. The highest form of worship is to worship the devotee of the Lord. And Sudama's wife was doing that. So she never told her husband, oh, why are you just doing this? Go out, don't be lazy, man, go out, earn some money, stop being lazy. But Sudama, he was a Brahmana and he was doing the work of a Brahmana very perfectly. A Brahmana's duty is to give spiritual education and to give the understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to everybody. In Padma Purana, it says, the work, the kind of activities that a Brahmana should do. Sat karma nipuno vipro mantra tantra visharada. So the Brahmana engages in 6 types of activities: Patan, Patan, Jajan, Jajan, Dhan, Pratigraha. So these are the 6 activities of a real Brahman, of a true Brahman. Patan means he's very learned, he's expert in Vedic knowledge. And Patan means he not just that he knows his knowledge, he gives it out to everybody. He goes out and distributes his knowledge. And Jajan, he's expert in worshipping the deity and doing all forms of yajnas. And not that just he knows, Jajan, he goes and teaches others how to worship. And he does yajnas on behalf of others. And dana is to give charity. They're very charitably disposed. And pratigraha, he also gives charity. He accepts charity and gives charity. And a Brahmana will take what he needs and the rest he will give away in charity. He'll never save for tomorrow or the next year. That's real Brahmana. I take what I use and immediately I give. Right? And Brahmanas always keep themselves in poverty. Why? Because they don't get attracted to material things and they always depend on the Lord's mercy. Srila Prabhupada said, if a Brahmana receives 1 lakh rupees, the very next day he will be in poverty again. Because a Brahmana will never keep the 1 lakh. He'll take what he needs. He needs 100 rupees, 1,000, 2,000 rupees, and the rest immediately. Not that mentality of I'm going to save it, I'm going to invest it. That's not Brahman mentality. So Prabhupada gives a very nice example in another place. There's a king in Krishna Nagar. Krishna Nagar is near Mayapur in Nadia district. So there, the king's wife, they were bathing in the Ganga. And the king's wife was talking to her the other maid servants, and they were just joking. And then there was another lady taking bath further down in the Ganga. And they were telling the king's wife, oh, do you know that lady? Her husband is a very great sadhu. He's great Brahmana. And the wife heard it and said, oh, acha, okay. So she went back home that day and she told the husband, look, there is a very nice Brahmana here in Krishna Nagar. Why don't you go and see if you can do some service to him? So the king went to see the Brahmana. The Brahmana was living in an old, in a hut with a tin roof, lots of holes. So the king went there and there wasn't even a proper seat for the king. So the king said, oh, I understand you're a Brahmana. I'd like to do some service for you. Is there anything I can do for you? And he says, no, there's nothing. I don't need anything. I'm fully satisfied. So really, but look, there's so many holes in your roof. When it rains, what will happen? So no, the water will come, but we'll put some pots and collect the water. That's no big deal. Okay. So how about food? What do you do for food? Said, oh, my disciples, because he runs a toll, like a school, and the students some will bring rice, some will bring dal, some will bring sabjis. So like this, they'll bring and my wife will cook and we'll have prasad. So no, okay. So what if there's no sabji, students don't bring any sabji or dal? So we'll just take the rice, and you see opposite my house, there is a tamarind tree. We'll take the tamarind from that and mix with the rice and eat. Okay. So and tamarind is sometimes it's not in season. There won't be any tamarind. What will you do? So I'll just take the leaves and I'll mix with the rice and eat. And the king was surprised. He said, and that you'll be satisfied with that? He said, yes, because I live simply, and just by eating this, my mind will become very clear, and whatever I read, I can understand very clearly. So that's why Brahmanas, they always keep themselves in poverty so that they can spend more time in doing devotional service. So Sudama was such a perfect Vaishnava Brahmin. So he would always keep himself in poverty. But the wife was always in anxiety because she always wanted to serve her husband. And she can only serve a husband if she has some paraphernalia to serve the husband. So if there's no sabji, what can the wife do? So there was a point where she could not bear to not be able to serve her husband. So at that point, she had no choice but to ask her husband. So she knew that a husband has no interest in material things, but yet she was pushed to approach him. And she asked him, we are in so much poverty. You always say your friend Krishna, he was your friend in Gurukul. Now he's the king of Dwaraka. Why don't you go and approach him? He's the husband of the goddess of fortune. Right? And he's very dear to Brahmanas. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha. So he's very dear. Brahmanas are very dear to him. He will definitely help you. Right? So why don't you go and see Krishna? And actually, Krishna is in everyone's heart. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto. So Krishna wanted to have darshan of his friend. So he impelled through his wife. He gave her that intelligence to go and ask Sudama, why don't you go and visit Krishna? He says, you are such a saintly, self-controlled person. And Krishna is your only shelter. And Krishna will give you himself. So what is this little bit of wealth? This is nothing for Krishna. Why don't you go? So he will definitely give you. Please, why don't you go and see Krishna? But the Brahmana, he didn't feel that this was right. He said, no, I cannot approach Krishna for this kind of material things. But yet, so you know how wives are, when they want something, they ask you for something, and you don't do it. It can become quite a big problem. So he says, okay, yes, I'll satisfy my wife, that's fine. But he took it in a different way. He was thinking, my wife is giving me the opportunity to have darshan, uttama shloka darshan, darshan of Krishna. That's how Sukadeva Goswami describes it. He's thinking, oh, she's giving me a wonderful opportunity to meet Krishna. So therefore I will go. It's not that I want anything material, but I'll use this opportunity to visit Krishna and have darshan of Krishna. And his wife was satisfied, said, okay, thank you. And then he said, okay, I can go and see Krishna, but what do we have? We've got nothing. I need to go and give, when I'm meeting Krishna after so long, I have to give him something, a small gift. And she looked around the house and they had nothing. So she quickly went and she went to 4 different houses and she begged for a little bit of rice. And what she got was not nice, good quality basmati rice. What she got was just broken rice, the rice that, is all chipped. And she had 4 handfuls of this from 4 different houses. And how was she going to put it? She didn't have a nice box or a nice pot. She just put it in an old torn cloth, tied it up. And then she gave it to Sudama. And Sudama carried that and he put it under his arms and he started heading towards Dwaraka. So Krishna had a desire. Not Krishna, sorry. Sudama had a desire. His desire was that he didn't want any material attachments. He did not want any material attachments. He didn't want to have that. Whereas his wife, she was thinking, I want to serve Krishna's devotee. And therefore I want something. I want some wealth so that I can serve Krishna's devotee. So in one hand, Sudama doesn't want anything. On the other hand, the wife wants everything so she can serve Sudama. And the rest of this pastime is how Krishna fulfills both their desires. And by doing this, Sudama's wife will attain all perfection. In Mukunda Mala Stotra, Kulashekar Alvar sings this. It's quite a famous verse. Majjanmana palamidam madhukaita bhare mad prarthaniya mad anugraha esha eva Tvadbhritya bhritya paricharaka bhritya bhritya bhrittasya bhritya iti mam smaralokanata. He said, the perfection of my life is if you would consider me the servant of 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 your servant. 7 times he said, Britya, Britya, servant of the servant of the servant of. And that's the perfection of life. And that was the perfection that Sudama's wife was aspiring for. And Krishna fulfilled both of their desires. So he left towards Dwaraka, was extremely happy. He was just thinking, oh, how wonderful it is. I'm finally going to see Krishna after so many years. And when I see Krishna, I'm going to embrace him. And I'll finally have Krishna's association. Then he's thinking, oh, but maybe the guards might not recognize me. They might think I'm a beggar and they might not let me in. Oh, and will Krishna even recognize me? What if he doesn't recognize me? So like this, he was constantly meditating on the Lord. And then he reached the outskirts of Dwaraka. And in Dwaraka, Krishna is very, very favorable to the Brahmanas. So he told his guards, as long as any Brahmanas come, just let them in. Don't stop them. But Sudama was thinking, oh, I look like a poor beggar. They might not let me in. So he saw some Brahmanas going and he just joined the group with them and got entrance into Dwaraka. So now once he got into Dwaraka, he was confused because there were thousands, 16,108 palaces. He's like, where am I going to find Krishna? Which palace am I going to go and find Krishna? But actually, he would have found Krishna in every palace. So like that, he just walked into one particular palace. And the minute he walked into that palace, he was just overwhelmed with ecstasy. And the palace was so gorgeously decorated. And he felt like he was swimming in an ocean of transcendental bliss, just entering the palace. At this time, Krishna was sitting on the bed of Rukmini with Rukmini, his chief queen. And from a distance, Krishna saw Sudama. And immediately he jumped out of the bed and he ran towards Sudama. And Rukmini was thinking, where is my Lord going? And he just ran to Sudama and hugged Sudama. He embraced Sudama, and Krishna was feeling so much pleasure hugging Sudama. Krishna is a reservoir of all transcendental pleasures. He gives pleasure to everyone. He was getting so much pleasure from hugging Sudama. And touching Sudama's body, Krishna started crying, and tears were dripping onto the shoulders of Sudama. To a common man, Sudama looked like a beggar, like a poor beggar, and they couldn't understand why Krishna was hugging this person. And then Krishna brought him and sat him on Rukmini's bed. And he offered him some fruit and some drinks. And then Krishna started washing Sudama's feet, doing Pada Puja. And then he took that water and he sprinkled it on his own head for his purification. And he gave it to his queens. Here, you all purify yourself. When we're trying to purify something, we say, apavitra pavitrova sarvavastangato piva yat smaret pundhari kaksham sabhaya abhyantara suchi. So just by remembering the lotus eye pundhari kaksham, we become cleansed internally and externally. So this person who we think of to get purified, he is becoming purified by drinking the foot washings of this Brahmana. It's hard to understand that. And it's just amazing how Krishna gives more importance to his devotees. And then Krishna smeared the Brahmana's body with sandalwood, with aguru, saffron, and he offered incense and arati to Sudama. And Rukmini and all the other servants, they were astonished. So what is going on? Who is this poor beggar, and why is Krishna serving him? Our Lord and Master, he's serving him like this. He's personally receiving him at the entrance of the palace. He's washing his feet. So they realized this person must be someone quite special. It's not an ordinary person. So they said, if our master is serving him, then we better help him in his service. So they started bringing all the arati paraphernalia, and Lakshmi Devi herself, Rukmini, Queen Rukmini, she started taking a chamara and she was fanning. And Sudama was thinking, what is going on? I'm sitting in the goddess of fortune's bed, and the goddess of fortune is fanning me, and Krishna is doing arati. So maybe Krishna mistook me for someone else. Oh. And when he was thinking this, Krishna was thinking, oh, no, he's trying to tell Sudama, no, I know you. He said, remember, Sudama, how we were in Gurukul together, serving our spiritual master, Sandipani Muni. And when old friends, when they get together, they start talking about the good old days, about how things were in our childhood, in our college. But that's Prajalpa, that's Gramya Katha. But this, when Krishna is reminiscing about his past, that is Krishna Katha, that is transcendental. So he started talking about the pastimes in Gurukul. And he asked him, after finishing our studies in Gurukul, what happened? Did you go back? Did you get married? Did you accept a suitable wife? Krishna told him, I knew from the beginning that you are not attached to the materialistic way of life. You don't take pleasure in all this material wealth. And such people in the world, it's very rare to find someone who's not attached to material opulence. But even those who are not attached to material opulence, sometimes they will accept some wealth. Why? Just to show how an ideal grahastha should live, right? So such persons, they're still acting according to my instruction. They have no material attachments, but they collect some just to show people how to lead an ideal family life. So, and then he says, now we are situated in spiritual life now because of what we have learned from our spiritual master. Krishna goes on to explain the different types of masters, spiritual masters. He says the first one is the father who gives birth to us. And then he talks about an initiating spiritual master, a Diksha Guru, and a Guru who gives us instructions, a Siksha Guru. And then Krishna says, both the Siksha Guru and the Diksha Guru are as good as myself. So we sing every morning, Sakshad Haritvena Samasta Sasti. Sakshad Hari, spiritual master, is as good as God. And Krishna himself is saying here, both the Siksha Guru and the Diksha Guru. And he says a human being must utilize this rare opportunity of having three spiritual masters, being taken human birth, having a human body given by our father, accepting as a guru, a Siksha Guru and a Diksha Guru. This is the perfect boat. This material body is, this human body is the perfect boat by which to cross the ocean of material existence. And we have the perfect captain, the Diksha and Siksha Gurus. And we've got the favorable winds that are the words of Krishna, the scriptures, Srila Prabhupada's books. And one who has understood and utilizes this human form of life to do that, he's used the human life for the correct purpose. And he's telling Sudama, yes, you have utilized your human life properly because you have used this rare opportunity to surrender to a spiritual master, and you're following the words of Krishna, you've developed bhakti. So how did this happen? So do you remember the time in Gurukul? One time we went to collect firewood. Our guru's mother told us, the winter is coming, so we need some firewood. Can you go and get some firewood? So they went into a dense forest and collected wood. But because they went into the dense forest, they got lost. Then unexpectedly, there was a storm. There was lightning, thunder, heavy rain, and the whole place got flooded. And they couldn't find their way back to Sandipani Muni's ashram. Now it's interesting. Krishna, at the age of 7, he carried the Govardhan hill to protect the Vrajavasis from the wrath of Indra. Whereas here, as an ideal disciple, he didn't display his godhood. He actually got wet, drenched in that rain. Indra, Varuna, Vayu, everyone is afraid of Krishna. They act on Krishna's instruction. And here Krishna didn't ask them to stop. So they got soaked. They spent the whole night. They were keeping the wood and covering the wood so that the wood wouldn't get wet. And they became drenched. And they were just shivering, soaked to the bone. And the next day morning, their spiritual master was so anxious. He said, "Where are my disciples?" So he came with all his disciples. They were searching for Krishna and Sudama, and finally they found Krishna and Sudama. And Sandipani Muni was so overwhelmed. He said, "You have suffered so much trouble. You have gone through so much trouble for me. Everyone would like to look after their body first. Everyone looks after their own body, after their own comfort. But you have given up all your bodily comforts just to serve the spiritual master." And that is a bona fide student. A bona fide disciple will take all sorts of troubles for the satisfaction of the spiritual master. Says that is the only way. Now we all have a debt to our spiritual master. Our spiritual master has given us the greatest wealth in the world. He's giving us transcendental knowledge. He's giving us pure love of Godhead, and we are indebted to him. And it says that we can never fulfill the debt that we have to the spiritual master, but the disciple must always try constantly to repay that debt. And the way to do it is to take all sorts of troubles just for the satisfaction of the spiritual master. And Krishna says that's the duty of the spiritual master, to dedicate his life to the spiritual master. And then the spiritual master, Sandipani Muni, says, "I bless you that all your desires will be fulfilled." And what's the desire of the disciple? To fulfill the desires of the spiritual master. And then he says, you will get all the understanding. Whatever you have learned, you'll get the real understanding, and they will always remain in your memory. So we may read so many things. We may study so many things. But in order for us to realize it, we have to have satisfied the spiritual master. If not, everything will be just book knowledge. It says, "Yasya deve para bhakti yata deve tata guru tasyaite katita hyarta prakashante mahatmana." It says, only those who have implicit faith in Krishna and at the same time in the spiritual master, all the imports of the Vedic knowledge are revealed from within the heart. So faith in the spiritual master means accepting his instructions and serving him, satisfying the spiritual master and all that transcendental. You can read as much as you want, but that will not be revealed. It's only revealed when we satisfy the spiritual master. So yes, that is something very important that Krishna is teaching us here. And he's saying how Sudama got this perfect transcendental knowledge. So like that, Krishna was saying, we had so many experiences with our spiritual master. And then Sudama says, no, actually, you are the Supreme Lord, and you are the eternal spiritual master for the whole world, Jagat Guru. And I had the fortune of living with you in the house of the spiritual master. Therefore, I have attained perfection. And so like this, they were talking, and Krishna, he decided to ask Sudama now for the offering that he had brought. So he said, Sudama, I'm sure we're meeting after such a long time. I'm sure you have brought me some offering. Your wife would have definitely given something. Please let me have it. But Sudama was so embarrassed because Krishna was living in a palace. He was getting so many wonderful varieties of offerings. What is this simple offering? He says, no. And Krishna, if he eats, how can Krishna eat this hard, stale rice? It's not fit to be offered to Krishna. So thinking like this, he was bending his head down and holding that packet under his arm. But Krishna reached out and snatched it from under his arm and he said, what is this? Oh, what have you brought for me? And then Krishna opened it up and he saw this. He took one handful and put it in his mouth. And Krishna became extremely blissful. He was so happy. And he said, these few grains will satisfy not just me, but satisfy the entire world. So normally when we offer, we look for the best ingredients. We cook it very nicely. And then we offer it in wonderful plates and bowls and put tulasi. And then we'll bring the offering before the Lord. And then again, we purify the offering with mantras, with mudras, and then we request the Lord to take a seat and honor the, accept the bhoga. And then at that time also, we're hoping that Krishna will accept the offering. But here, Krishna, without any, this is not the best ingredient. It's not been offered with mantra and mudra, but he snatched it himself and he's relishing it so much. Why? So Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yomi bhaktya prayachati tad aham bhakti upahritam asnami priyatatmanaha. It says, if one offers me a fruit, flower, leaf, water, but with love, then he accepts it. So the main ingredient is love. That's the only way, that's the only thing that Krishna accepts. And you don't have to be rich. How much is a leaf, a flower you can pick from along the street? How much does water cost? And even a poor man can do it, but the main ingredient is love, bhakti. Prahlad Maharaj says in his prayers to Narasimhadev, he says, Manye dana bijana rupa tapashruta ojas teja prabhava bala paurusham buddhi yoga naradhana hi bhavanti parasya pumsho bhaktya tutosha bhagavan gajayutapaya. He says wealth, dana, abhijana, aristocratic family, rupa, beauty, austerity, knowledge of the scriptures, sensory prowess, influence, strength, intelligence, mystic yoga. By all of this, you cannot please Krishna. Because if you can please Krishna by all of this, no. He says, Bhaktya Tutosha Bhagavan Gajayutapa. He says, an elephant like Gajendra, he had none of these things. Dana, Rupa, Tapa, he had none of these, but he was able to please you, which means that none of this is required to please you. What is really needed is Bhaktya Tutosha Bhagavan. Only by bhakti can Krishna be pleased. So therefore, Krishna accepted Sudama's pure devotion. And then he was about to take another mouth, and Lakshmi Devi stopped him. She said, oh, my lord, if you eat everything, there won't be any more remnants for myself and all my friends and the maidservants. And also in one mouth, you would have given Sudama all the wealth he needs in this life and even the next life. And actually, Lakshmi Devi also had another motive, because Prabhupada says, if one offers with love and devotion to Krishna, then Lakshmi Devi herself is indebted to go and live in that person's house. Lakshmi Devi doesn't want to leave the service of Krishna. She's like, no, I don't, Rukmini doesn't want to leave. Said, if you take one more mouth, then I'll have to go and live in his house, but I want to always be with you. So please, one mouth is enough. So like this, Sudama spent the night in the palace of Krishna and Rukmini. And then the next day he returned, he got up and he was about to go home. So he left Dwaraka and Krishna walked him all the way to the edge of Dwaraka. He offered obeisances to Krishna, and then he started going back home. And on his way back home, he was just thinking again. So he had come there for a reason. He was supposed to ask Krishna. Now, how many of you had this experience? If your wife asks you to do something and you go to the shop and you buy everything else except what she asked you to buy, you'll be in trouble when you get back home. But he went there, he did everything. He had darshan of Krishna, spoke about his childhood pastimes, he had Krishna's association, but he didn't ask for the main thing that his wife sent him there. So now he is going back, and yet he was thinking, oh, how wonderful Krishna is. He knew that if he had given me any wealth, I would have forgotten about his devotional service. So he's keeping me in this situation. He's helping me by not giving me any wealth. He treated me like a brother. He made me sit down in his queen's bed. And his wife, who's the goddess of fortune, was fanning me. And he's the lord of the demigods. He's the object of worship. The demigods are trying to worship him, and he is worshiping me. How merciful is this Lord? So thinking like this, he was just, he's just ecstatic. And then when he went back to his village, he was a bit shocked. He couldn't find his hut anymore. So in the place of his hut, there was a huge palace. And he was thinking, maybe I'm in the wrong place. But he looked around, he said, no, this is my village. He said, where did this palace come from? And there were so many nice lakes, courtyards, ponds with lotus flowers and lilies, wonderful gardens, beautiful birds. And then he came to the entrance of the palace and he saw so many servants, and there were a bunch of musicians. And these musicians announced the arrival of Sudama, and his wife came out. And when he saw this lady coming out, he was shocked. She was like the goddess of fortune herself. She was bedecked with wonderful jewelry. And she looked like the goddess of fortune. And Sudama was confused. And his wife offered obeisances. And then he understood. He was thinking, so this is what happened. So this is what Krishna has done. This is the mercy of Krishna. He said, I'm such a poor Brahmana. And I've been so unfortunate my whole life. How come suddenly I have so much wealth? This must be because Krishna had cast his merciful glance upon me. Such a small service I did. Usually we hear, Ye tamam prapadyante tam stateva bhajamiham. According to your surrender, Krishna reciprocates accordingly. But here he did such a little service, and Krishna gave so much more. So he got so much wealth, such a beautiful palace. But despite this, he and his wife led the same simple life they were leading when they were living in the cottage. They would use everything they had, all the resources, all the wealth that Krishna had given them, back in the service of Krishna, worshipping the deities, reading scriptures, giving charity, accepting the same 6 activities of Brahmana. He was doing it without giving up. It said that he was still lying, even though he had the palace and all the opulence, he was still sleeping on the floor every day and constantly meditating on the Lord. So like this, they spent within a short time, they left the body and went back to the spiritual world. And so the interesting thing to note is when Sudama wanted to go to visit Krishna, his wife didn't say, I also want to come along, bring me along, let's bring the children, let's go for a holiday. She wasn't interested in seeing Krishna. She only wanted to serve her husband. But at the end, she got the same benefit of going back to Godhead, which is something there. So just the last part of the Bhagavatam in this chapter, it says that Sudama had all the he had all the qualities. He was a great devotee of the Lord, but he just had one little attachment left. And this pastime was done to get rid of that little bit of attachment that he had. He was already a great devotee of the Lord, but just a tiny last bit of attachment. And that was, he was attached to being detached. Prabhupada says, even if you have an iota of attachment, you cannot go back to the spiritual world. You have to take birth again. So just that iota of attachment, he was attached to being detached. The renunciation, he had a little bit of subtle pride that, oh, I won't accept anything because it'll affect my devotional service. And he was trying to keep himself firm. But Krishna gave him all the wealth in the world for him to overcome that attachment. And then what did he do? He didn't mind whatever he had. He used that in the service of Krishna. And so that little bit of attachment can't even be there. We have to be completely pure if we want to associate with Krishna, who is completely pure. And this detachment, Krishna himself came 500 years ago in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to teach us this. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he sings, Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga Sikshatameka Purusha Purana Shri Krishna Chaitanya Sariradhari Kripam Buddhiryas Tamaham Prapati. He came, he sings, I want to take shelter of Krishna, who came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who came to teach us what is real knowledge, what is devotional service, and what is real detachment. Detachment from material existence and attachment to Krishna, that is bhakti. And Rupa Goswami further elaborated on what that detachment means. Detachment is not giving up material things, but is to utilize material things in the service of Krishna. And we can see that in the examples of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada and our Srila Prabhupada. His whole life is, he accepted so many things, money, cars, apartment, houses, temples, but yet he was unattached to anything because everything he got was used in the service of Krishna. So time's almost up. Let us just meditate on many points in this Leela that we can learn. One of the things that I would take back or remember is how just by satisfying the spiritual master, like Krishna and Sudama did, then we can understand the science of Krishna consciousness. And then we can remain fixed in devotional service in any situation, whether we have something material, whether we don't have any material possession, we can always be fixed in our devotional service and eventually attain the supreme destination. Jai. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai, jai.
Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Vancha Kalpatru Vishta Kripa Sindhu. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Kadamba Kanaka Prabhu ki jai.
Kadamba Prabhu ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Anybody got any question, comments, please?